Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Beyond at Home. I'm Pauline and this is Lauren. Just want to say thanks for joining us, whether that's on Facebook or over on the YouTube channel. On this episode of Beyond at Home, going to be looking at what God has been doing in the community and looking at ways that the best years are in front of us.
Yeah, so if this morning is the first time you're tuning in, we're so happy to have you here. Beyond is wanting to create a church that unchurched people love to attend. So whether this whole Jesus thing is very new to you, whether you wouldn't typically attend, a church building, we're just so happy to have you here. And we think that what's going to be spoken about this morning will really, really help you. Pauline, what are you doing?
Just opening my party pack.
What's in there?
Well, I've got some lollipops.
Ooh. Cake
Yeah,
mix.
that's mine. So
Okay. What else is in there? Ooh, some colouring in.
Yeah,
I love colouring in.
That's mine too. You should have registered for your own party pack. You can have a balloon.
Oh, great! Thanks.
And I'll play with the rest of this.
We hope you love interacting with your party packs during the message, and we'll catch up with you later.
Well, on this very special 5th birthday edition of Beyond at Home, we're going to look at and celebrate all that God has done in and through us over the past 5 years. And we're going to look at how we can ensure as a local church that our best years are ahead of us. If you've just started recently tuning into Beyond at Home, or you've become a part of the Beyond community over the last 12 or 18 months, or maybe even Beyond has gone from, for you, just a church to being your church, you might not know that Beyond actually started over a simple cup of coffee. And that cup of coffee and that conversation morphed and changed from one cup of coffee and one conversation to lots of cups of coffee and lots of conversations. It grew from a small group of people to about 8 people who were planning and praying. And we weren't planning and praying about how to start a local church. What we were planning and praying about was pretty simple. How do we take the timeless message of Jesus and communicate it in a timely way to an area and a region that for maybe a couple of generations in their family had never been to church, and so didn't see the importance or feel the importance or even know about this person called Jesus? Really, if we were to kind of equate it to maybe a business sense or an organizational sense, essentially what the question we were asking is, how would you create a coffee shop for people who don't like coffee? In fact, even the name Beyond came out of this desire to be for the local community and figure out a way for the local community to engage with Jesus. It had kind of gotten to that point where we kind of thought, hey, maybe we'll start a church. Maybe God's calling us to start a church. And a group of us went away to, someone has an apartment at the Sunshine Coast. We went away there and we were sitting as a group planning and praying. And we're trying to articulate, hey, if we were to start this church, what would we want it to look like? What would we want it to be like? And someone was saying, well, we really just want it to be a place that doesn't focus on the building. Really, we want it to kind of be beyond church. We want people to see that following Jesus is not about coming to a location, but it's beyond church. And at that moment, everyone kind of looked at me like, well, I think we found our name. And 5 years ago today, or if you're not watching this live, June 14th, 2015, Beyond held its very first service. Right here in this building, which is Living Faith Church. And it's in fact thanks to the generosity of Living Faith that Beyond even exists at all. See, the team of 8 people who were sent from Living Faith to start Beyond really had no church planning experience. Well, we had no church planning experience at all. And none of us would have been handpicked to be on a church planting team. But what we did have is a belief that God cared deeply about this community. And if we were the ones who were here, then we were the ones who should do something about it. See, 2,000 years ago when Jesus walked the earth, people who were nothing like Jesus, and he liked them back. And we really believe that the world didn't need another church, but it needed a different kind of church. It needed a church where you could belong before or if you ever believed. It needed a church where you could come with your questions, with your doubts, with all the things you were unsure about God, Jesus, the Bible, and you could figure it out at your own pace. Really what the world needed, we believed, was a church that unchurched people would love to attend. And thanks to you, we're doing that. Whether you've been with us for 5 years or 5 minutes, you help us create a church that unchurched people love to attend. Every time you invite, every time you serve, every time you give financially, you help us create a church that unchurched people love to attend. In fact, a few of the ways that you have helped us do that is through.
You've been a part of over 10 Go Beyond events that have helped countless people who need a helping hand with things around the house.
You've also partnered with the Griffin community over the last 2 years at the Griffin Christmas Carnival to help put on an event that has over 5,000 people from the local community in attendance.
You've given away over $10,000 to community organisations
that are making a difference through our Be Rich campaign.
Woo!
We've created an environment for kids to help the next generation explore faith.
And we've relocated from Living Faith, who helped us launch, to move to the heart of Griffin. At Griffin State School, and formed a partnership with them. Since our relocation 2 years ago, we've grown from 1 service to 2. And if Beyond is a place that you would call home, if you would say, hey, Beyond Church is my church, then as your pastor, I just want to let you know how incredibly proud I am of you. In fact, it is one of the greatest privileges of my life to be on this journey with you. And as I walk through this now empty building where we used to gather, I'm reminded now more than ever of something we say over and over and over again here at Beyond, that the church is not a building. In fact, Jesus never said the church was a building. The church was always about the people. And that's why when COVID struck, the church didn't close. We pivoted, we adapted, but fundamentally nothing changed. Because the church has and always will be you, the people. And as we celebrate what God has been doing over the last 5 years in Beyond, using ordinary people like you and me to do extraordinary things, I want to give us a word of caution. Not because I'm trying to be a Debbie Downer, but because there is a tendency when we start to hear stories of life change that we'll start to ease our foot off the gas, that we'll start to sit back and think we've done it. And that ultimately what we'll do is we'll stop keeping the main thing, the main thing. And when churches stop keeping the main thing, who misses out ultimately are people who are far from God, people who are curious, people who have questions about God, Jesus, the Bible, whatever. And that's not who we are here at Beyond, and that's not who we ever want to be. In fact, 5 years from now, when we look back, we don't want to say our best years are behind us. We want to say we're just getting started. But there's something we need to do in order to keep the main thing front and center. Before I get to that though, I'd love for you to take a moment right now, just in the comments below or the chat on YouTube, let us know what your favorite moment is of Beyond over the past 5 years, because we'd love to experience Beyond through your eyes. I'll let you know what my favorite moment, and it's not really a moment, it's kind of cheating, but it's a whole series of moments that we have had. It's any time we get to baptize someone. Baptisms are my favorite moments that we ever have at Beyond, because it's a story of life change. And we get to hear how God has woven his way into a person's story and the way in which it has made their lives better and allowed them to live life more fully. Now, back to how we keep the main thing the main thing. Jesus actually tells us what this is in his greatest sermon ever. And on the day that Jesus gave this message on the side of a mountain, one of his closest followers, Matthew, was sitting next to him, and Matthew was writing down every single word that Jesus was saying. And the words that Matthew wrote down that day have survived antiquity. And when I look at them in our time together, they're actually survived antiquity in a biography that Matthew put together on the life of Jesus. And if you're kind of new to the whole Jesus thing, I encourage you, you should just read this. Just read what it was like to see life, the life of Jesus through Matthew's eyes. But anyway, this is what Matthew records Jesus saying. He says, you. Now, when Jesus says you in this context, he's not meaning like you personally, but he's meaning you as in every single follower of Jesus. Jesus says, you are the salt of the earth. But what good is salt if it has lost its saltiness? It'll be thrown out and trampled underfoot. And we're still kind of like, well, what do you even mean by that, Jesus? It doesn't make sense. But the people listening on the side of this mountain would have been nodding because they would have understood exactly what Jesus meant. Because see, where Jesus lived and where Jesus was giving this message was right on the edge of the desert. And so when you live on the edge of a desert, firewood is not readily available. And so when you were cooking food, you didn't actually use firewood to fuel your fire. Instead, what you would use is animal dung. And what you would add to the animal dung in order to help it burn hotter and brighter for longer is salt. See, really what Jesus is saying to you and to me is the same thing that he was saying to the people who were listening to him on the side of this mountain 2,000 years ago. That when followers of Jesus interact with the messiness of the world, messy relationships, messy situations, social injustices and racism, when we interact with that, we bring God's story into the picture. And when God's story intervenes with someone else's story and intertwines itself in someone else's story, it causes their story to burn hotter and brighter than it ever did before. And Jesus continues, you, again referring to all Jesus followers, he says, you are the light of the world. Like a city on a hilltop, you cannot be hidden. And then he kind of gives another analogy. He's kind of like, it's as if you were to put a light in a house. You don't light your house up only to put it under a basket, or in our words, to kind of like hide it. And everyone would have been like, yeah, of course, because when you use light, you want it to illuminate something. Jesus says, in the same way, let your good deeds shine out so that people will praise your heavenly Father. Now, this is so important, particularly if you're a follower of Jesus, especially if you're a follower of Jesus. So if you're in another tab, or if you're distracted, or if you're talking, come back, pay attention for one second, because I want you to understand exactly what Jesus is saying. You ready? What he means is the way that you live your life matters. And the reason it matters is because of what hangs in the balance of the way you live your life. See, what hangs in the balance of the way you live your life and the way I live my life is not our bank account. It's not whether we get on the For You page of TikTok. It's not the kind of career we will have. It's not even our families. What hangs in the balance of the way that you and I as Jesus followers live our lives is people's eternities. And while it's important and actually really healthy for us to celebrate all that God has done and all that God's been doing in us over these past 5 years, I don't want us to ever lose our saltiness, to ever forget who we are actually shining a light on and the reason why we do everything that we're doing in the first place. And so my challenge for those of us who would call ourselves followers of Jesus, my challenge for those of you who would say Beyond is not just a church, but it's my church. For the next season, which is for the next 3 months, here's what I want you to do. It's really, really simple. Point people to Jesus. It's that simple. The way not to lose our saltiness, the way to ensure that we keep the main thing is to continue to keep pointing people to Jesus. And with our physical environments no longer operating, this takes on a whole new meaning. Because maybe in the past for you, when you thought, hey, I want to point someone to Jesus, what you thought is, I want to bring them to a location. I want to bring them to a space. But the reality is that's never been what the church has been about. And so pointing people to Jesus in this COVID and post-COVID era is going to look really, really different. It could be as simple as when you're listening to a message, or maybe you're tuning in to the Beyond the Message podcast. As you're listening or as you're tuning in, a name comes to mind. And so instead of just thinking about that name, what you actually do is you share this message or you share this content with a friend. You say, hey, I don't really know why your name came to mind, but maybe this will be helpful for you on your journey through life. Instead of maybe inviting someone to a physical location, instead you invite them to Beyond at Home and you share the link on your social media. Maybe you invite them to one of the virtual connect groups that we have that are really the lifeblood of everything we do here at Beyond. Maybe you like and get engaged in the comment section and share what we've been doing on social media, because you never know who is scrolling through their newsfeed and what you'll like or what you'll share might just pop up, and how desperately they might need to hear the message that we're talking about that week or for that series. Now, before you write me off because, Chris, I'm not really into that and I don't really use my social media that way and I kind of don't like to push the whole Jesus thing. Just hear me out for a second. Because what Jesus said on the side of that mountain 2,000 years ago rings true for us as well. Because the reality is that we are stewards of this generation's faith and the one that is to come. How we live our lives, the way we engage with each other, the way we engage with the world, the way in which we have challenging, difficult conversations, communicates to the generation coming behind us what it means and what it looks like to follow Jesus. So let me ask you a really, really awkward question, particularly if you're a follower of Jesus. Do we want to be known as the generation who asked what they could get from church? Or do we want to be known as the generation who asked how we could engage with the church to make a difference in the world? And the reality is, when you point people to Jesus, when you begin to engage, you begin to shape the future in a small way for our region, our community here in Griffin. But not just that. You begin to shape the future in a small way for our city and for our nation and for the world. And my prayer and my hope is that you will continue to point people to Jesus, because here at Beyond, we are just getting started doing that.
Pauline, thanks for sharing your bubbles from your party pack with me.
You're welcome. Hope you guys are enjoying them as well, and getting to celebrate as a family.
Oh, I'm not very good at it.
You can have this one.
There we go. So now's the part where we would normally say thank you, we'd have a bit of a chat after, but instead we want to invite you to our after party on Zoom.
But don't worry if you don't have Zoom, because we put a few videos in the comments below to help you log in either on your app or device, and that way you can check it out while the band's playing a few songs and you haven't missed anything.
If you unfortunately can't join us for our after party, we would like to invite you back again next week. We're actually going to be taking a bit of a break from our normal kind of program, and instead we're actually going to be talking about the tensions that we've currently seen sort of around the world, and yeah, it'll just be yeah, it's a lot of tension. And yeah, we'd just love to see you back for that, and we can definitely have a chat all together about how we're feeling and what we might be able to do in this time. So we'd love to see you then. Bye!
Surrounding me, let it break. At your name still, call the sea to still, the rage in me to still every wave. At your name, Jesus, Jesus, you make the darkness tremble. Jesus, 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 you silence fear. Jesus, Jesus, you make the darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus, breathe, call these bones to live, call these lungs to sing. Yeah, I will praise Jesus, Jesus, you make the darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus, silence fear. Jesus, Jesus, you make the darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus, your name is a light that the shadows can't deny. Your name cannot be overcome. Your name is a light forever lifted high. Your name cannot be overcome. Jesus, Jesus, you make the darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus, silence fear. Jesus, Jesus, you make the darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus, your name is a light that the shadows can't deny. Your name cannot be overcome. Your name is a light forever lifted high. Your name cannot be overcome. Jesus, Jesus, you make the darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus, silence fear. Jesus, Jesus, you make the darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus.
This is Every Little Thing by Hillsong Young and Free. Your favor waits within the future. My dreams are small compared to yours. Why should I worry about tomorrow when I know that all I've got to do is trust you, Lord? 'Cause every little thing's gonna be alright. Every little thing's gonna be just fine. Whether I can see it now, I know you will work it out for good. 'Cause every little thing, everything will be alright. Behind the scenes and in the details, you plan the perfect way for me. Why would I dwell upon the road's uncertainties when all I've got to do is look to you? Yeah, all I've got to do